Hey guys, welcome back to the Unshakable Habits podcast. I know it has been a while since we released new episodes, but there's a very good reason for that. I'm going to touch on that here in just a few minutes. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you what we have in store for today's episode of the podcast. I had a chance to interview Sean Robinson, and Sean had this experience where he started with a dry January challenge, gave up alcohol. It was never meant to be a long-term thing, but it became a long-term thing. And Sean used that to get completely sober. He used that as a springboard to start making other positive changes in his life, including losing 100 pounds. So Sean shares a lot of his story, and we actually spent a lot of time talking about some of the struggles that Sean went through. And I know I've gone through this myself in different situations, and I'm sure you guys have as well, where being in an environment with other men was not necessarily conducive to change, right? There's a lot of, how do I say, there's a lot of issues where as men, we've been kind of taught that we don't ask for help. We're not supposed to encourage each other. We're supposed to put each other down. And this is the old way of thinking of masculinity, right? And some people call this toxic masculinity. I don't think there's anything toxic about masculinity. I hate that term. But what I do think is that there are some things that as men that we've been taught, that society has told us that we should be doing, that absolutely hold us back. And we need to let go of those things as men. And one of those things is being willing to ask for help. So Sean and I actually talked a lot about that. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not this new age, men are supposed to be soft kind of stuff that you hear a lot about now. We actually found a really good balance, I feel, in this conversation where we talked about letting go of some of those old beliefs, some of those old patterns, while also maintaining our masculinity. So that was something that was really important to me. And I think it was important to Sean that we also kept that tone to it as well. So hope you guys enjoy the interview today. Before I get you to that, I just wanted to give you a really quick update on what was going on with the podcast. So as you guys know, and I mentioned earlier, it's been a while since we recorded a new episode. And the reason for that was I wasn't really happy with where the podcast was going. Getting a lot of great feedback on it, but it just didn't feel right to me. And I'm really big on sometimes we have to trust our instincts. And so I sat on it, I prayed on it, I let myself sit in silence and allowed it to come to me. And it did. It came to me, guys. I realized I've been holding off on something that I'm personally very passionate about, and that's helping men to prioritize their physical and mental well-being. Now, why is that important? It's not about six-pack abs or big muscles or anything else. It's because I believe that when we help men become the best version of themselves physically and mentally, they become better husbands, they become better fathers, and they become better leaders at home, at work, and in their communities. And when we can help men do those things, we make the world a better place. Because guys, as I alluded to earlier, it's important that we embrace our masculinity. It's important that we claim that masculine energy that we have as men. That doesn't mean that we have to bring along all the baggage that masculinity has included over the years. It doesn't mean that we have to do things on our own. It doesn't mean we have to suck it up. It just means that as men, we have a certain energy that we bring to the table. And society right now, I feel like, is trying to take that away from us. So I wanted to really put this episode out as the very first relaunch episode because I love this topic where we are talking about this idea of how do we move forward, claim our masculinity, yet let go of the patterns and the beliefs that have held us back. So I hope you guys are loving that idea. I hope that you're as passionate about it as I am. But without further ado, let's jump into this thing.
Are you ready to break free from your old habits and create a better life for yourself and those around you? If so, welcome to Unshakable Habits, the podcast dedicated to helping men be better husbands, fathers, and leaders by prioritizing their physical and mental well-being. Each week, we'll look at health from a 360-degree perspective with inspiring stories and practical strategies for building unshakable habits that'll transform your life. Join Stephen Box, a board-certified health and wellness coach, and let's change the world together, one habit at a time.
Allow me to introduce my guest today, Mr. Sean Robinson. Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
You have this story that I think so many guys can relate to.
Yeah, I definitely don't feel like it's a unique story. I've worked construction and I'm an electrician by trade. Done that about 15 years on the volunteer fire department near where I live in Eastern Ontario, Canada. But this will be my 20th year. So my upbringing and family, I've always had that, do it yourself, get it done, don't talk about it. And the environments I've been in with careers and family, it's been very much, tough, masculine, get it done, don't complain, don't talk about it, no feelings. So I feel very experienced in keeping things bottled up and not exposing, we'll call a weakness or vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're in those type of environments, it's made even worse, right? Because now you have other people that have been brought up the same way, and no one wants to admit that they feel differently.
Absolutely. It's the common theme with a lot of the personalities, and whether you have that personality or not, you fall in line to a degree with kind of the way that everybody is. We're not talking about things. We're not talking about unshakable habits at all in those environments. And, to work on yourself and ask questions, whether someone is or not, you're not talking about it. You don't want to expose that you're feeling like you could use a hand, or that, you might have information that somebody else might benefit from. And there's a lot in, coming away from that environment, or to come out in that environment and say, listen, I'm not feeling great today, and this is where I'm at, and I've got these habits that I'm wanting to work on. And there's a lot of pressure to just stay in your lane and keep living the same way where I've come from.
Yeah, and I think something else that we see, and even in like a corporate environment, people might see this, right? Where because people don't want to talk about their feelings, it's hard for them to try to make these changes. A lot of times when you do start trying to make these changes, the amount of ridicule that you get, right? Everyone wants to keep you kind of at their level because they feel bad that they're not doing these things. And they're like, no, I don't want anybody else going to do stuff, because then I'm going to feel like I have to do something.
Yeah, and the men, and there are women too in construction, so I'm not generalizing that way, but it's a lot of the men that are given the hard times. They're, you're bothering your buddies, and there's questioning sexualities and all these things, and all the harshness of it. You're not going to talk about, the latest podcasts or the new books you're reading or self-help. Don't even mention the two words together in that environment, because all of a sudden you're going to, you're going to have your picture drawn on the bathroom, the porta potty wall, and, all the things that happen in construction. And it's a lot harder on you than saying anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, man. So kind of take us back to, like, what was that like for you? Like, obviously at some point you started kind of realizing, I want to make some changes, right? But you didn't really feel like you could say anything. So what was it like in that moment for you?
I think I wasn't sure yet the help I needed or what to even ask for. So in those environments where we're not talking about it, for me to not even know what was out there and what I needed, it was hard to find a starting point. My dad, talking about some upbringing, he was a mechanic by trade, or is a mechanic by trade, and he was brought up in that environment too. So a lot of the generational stuff was in the background on top of where I came from career stuff. So to realize that I had an issue, I didn't even know that I had that issue. I didn't realize that the thinking about where my mentality was and this is just who I am, that it took me a bit to get to a point where I acknowledged the fact that that was where my mind was, that I had fixed a problem that I wasn't sure at that point I even had, right?
Yeah.
When this started for me, it was, and when we talked in our pre-interview, it was like, where was the real moment that just cried for change? And my weight, I had been up and down like anybody dieting, anybody, most of us, we've gone up and down. And I was at a point where I was at my greatest. I'd lost 50 to 80 pounds and put it back on, but I was 320 pounds and was feeling awful. I was so negative. Everything felt like, there was success around me and, when was it going to fall in my lap? And very, very down and out about where I was at. I didn't know where to go for help, but I wasn't going to ask for it either because it was just brought up in me with my background and my circles to just figure it out, deal with it, move on. And it wasn't working, but I couldn't ask to fix it. So it was like very much caught in this situation that was never going to repair itself, right? Until I acknowledged that I needed to do something, it wasn't going to fix itself. So getting to that point and thinking, I'm overweight, I'm not feeling great. I for whatever reason, whatever inspiration around me, I started thinking about journaling. So I took this notebook and I just started venting in it. Why can't I figure this out? Why isn't this going to fix itself? I'm better than this. Like, just really not nice and having some really dark, like, confused moments. And I learned a lot about journaling later, and I'll touch on that. But, in the beginning, it was just a place for me to put this down on paper and vent and say, not see any judgment from it, not get that, like, from the coworker or from the family or from people that just weren't in the same situation, didn't understand. It was just a place for me to outlet and not have to hear, anything back. As things went on, I learned a lot more about journaling and record keeping and just tracking consistent. It became a lot better for me later.
Yeah.
It was a good starting point, but I wasn't going to talk about it. So I talk about it with my circles. So when I decided to stop drinking, it was not because I felt like there was a problem with my drinking. I felt like it was a good starting point. Dry January, it was just going to be, that first thing that I could do to, get some clarity and start some new habits. As I started to do that, looking back, it was almost like that was my first permission to myself to accept some other things, going to functions and not having drinks, past the 2-week window in dry January where resolutions fall off. I stayed with it, and it was challenging myself in those environments and those situations to not have drinks and not be a certain way. It was, I could be a different person. I could be the person that doesn't drink at a function. Well, I could be the person that starts to lose weight and stick with it. I could be the person that has successful resolutions. Once I started asking more positive questions and reflecting on how I felt about it, was more where I allowed that identity to change.
Yeah, it's interesting because, one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is this idea of what I call connected health. It revolves around this idea that health is more than just physical. Physical is 1/6 of the equation, right? There's also mental health, there's emotional health, there's relationships, there's environment, there's, spiritual health or being connected to something larger than you. And you kind of touched on that, right? Where you made really what was in the beginning more an environmental change, maybe a little bit of relationship stuff in there also, because you obviously had to be around certain people to kind of get away without drinking. But ultimately it started to turn into more of a mental thing, right? Now it's more of a mental challenge for you. And then the emotional aspect comes in because you start kind of feeling more confident in your ability to do this. You start feeling better about yourself. Your self-confidence starts to go up. And then you started to see that have positive physical benefits. And I think that that's just a really great illustration to help people see how even something really small that you don't think will necessarily lead to an end result can have such a big impact because all these things tie together.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think we realize how important the small things are to the bigger things. And when I started and I learned more about habits and creating positive change, it was kind of the first thing for me to decide, like, choose something. So, I wanted to get better at brushing my teeth. So I thought, I'm gonna do this twice a day. I'm gonna document it on the calendar, a couple check marks, morning and night, and count how many days in a row. And I was seeing all these check marks and things, and as it got to over 100 days, I tested myself to okay, now I'm going to stop documenting it and just see if this thing sticks, right? Because all the 21 days, 60 days to break a habit, 100 days changes a lifestyle, I wanted to test it out. So once I stopped writing it on the calendar, there's no more check marks for that particular item. It was a lifestyle. I couldn't leave my house in the morning without doing it. I couldn't go to bed without doing it. I'd be in bed and like, no, I gotta go. I forgot to do it. I'm gonna do it. So I brushed my teeth, and like, it went from something so small to, doing the kinds of things that allowed me to lose 100 pounds, like you mentioned. And you snowball and compound all of these small habits and all these small changes over time. It gives you a lot better result in the end,
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing I think that you kind of touched on too is, and this is, I think, an important tip for a lot of guys out there, is you can start with something that kind of has that manly feel to it, right? So if you were to go to your buddies at the firehouse and you're like, oh, I'm doing this dry January challenge, right? You're not going to get as much slack from that because you're doing a challenge, right? It's something that's meant to be hard. You're testing yourself. Versus if you go, you know what, man, I'm just going to stop drinking because, I just think that would be healthy for me to stop. Like unlimited ribbing at that point, right?
Yeah, that was the book that I wrote. It was, you could do dry January. Like I said at the beginning, it was a challenge, absolutely. And then, once you get into February, it's like, okay, well, dry February's thing too. That's kind of a challenge. All right. I'm surprised you're still doing it, but okay, well, we can handle that. But then once we got out of those two like dry months where there's, a lot of marketing for this change, it was like that. It was like, well, no, you're fine now. You did it. What you want to do it longer? Why would you do that to yourself? And it was like, it wasn't quite where I wanted to go with it yet. I didn't know how long I was going to not drink for or not do certain things, but it was like, yeah, as soon as I got out of those, we call it easier months, it was, and people didn't know how to react to it. It was like, it was confusing that someone they knew was just not going to do a certain thing anymore or not be a certain way anymore. And while they can't be in my head, it was, it was difficult for me because I was in my head to handle how I was going to deal with it and express to them what was going on so they could understand.
Yeah. You bring up a good point there. As you're making these changes, obviously people around you are kind of paying attention. You start getting the questions. What was the difference between the actual reaction that you got from people versus the reaction that you were going to get in your head?
There was some mixed reactions. There was people that were proud of it, right? There was people that saw the changes that maybe I didn't quite realize yet in my attitudes and things as it went on. And then there were people that were, maybe disappointed, in my book. And in the back, a good friend of mine was getting married, and COVID had postponed his wedding to a point where it fell within my window of not drinking. And we used to drink together all the time. So during, this journey, every time there was a function pre-wedding, getting fitted for the suits and, the different showers and celebrations ahead of time, I wasn't going to drink. And every time it was like, you better drink at my wedding. You better drink at my wedding. And his reaction, to answer your question, like a few others, were disappointed because I wasn't doing a certain thing anymore. So there was, that mixed reaction where proud people and disappointed people. And I was in the middle because I was very happy with the progression I had made to a certain point. But I was also, I was brought up, or I thought I was in this mindset that I had to, be the biggest host in the room and the biggest participant with this thing. And if there's shots and celebration and toasts, for, speaking to alcohol, it was like I had to be that person. So I didn't know, and I felt like I was letting myself down a bit by not participating in those things until I got to a point where, I realized that people aren't as worried about those things as we are. I was the one that felt I had to be the biggest participant. It wasn't that other people, were expecting that. And although they may have, once I had set my boundaries, they were fine with it. There was less and less anxiety felt by me because of how they were handling the situation than I put on myself originally.
Yeah. I think a big part of that too, like you mentioned your friend getting married. And I think that for so many guys, they have people in their lives that have just come to expect certain things of them, right? They expect you to be a certain way. And so there's this fear that when you're doing something different, that suddenly you're going to become a different person, right? And so now it's like, oh, well, here's my wedding coming up. And my best friend here might be a different person because he's not drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. In my book in the beginning, and just to touch on that for a second, I journaled throughout this whole thing. And once I decided to take a year off of drinking, I got it 10 months in and thought that this journal, this book that I have for myself, someone out there can use this. Someone can use this exact experience and take pieces from what I went through and what I documented for myself and apply it to themselves. The challenge I faced, the anxieties I felt, the tools I used. And, I talked about these rules, and a lot of my rules were they weren't rules to make it hard for myself. They were just a couple things to keep me focused. Like I wanted to have a good time. One of my rules was have fun. And that to me was just not hide from it, not stay at home, not, avoid things because I was afraid how I was going to handle it. It was, I wanted to go to these things. I just needed to know how I was going to deal with myself in the situation. The other was to, basically not be the guy in the corner drinking water, right? To participate. So not just go out to this thing, but like, if I have to pour it into a solo cup because everybody else has a solo cup, it was at least to participate, to look the part and not feel like I had to have those couple drinks first because it was in my head that I had to have them. It wasn't that anybody else knew, right? We don't gauge each other all night. And all of a sudden, someone loosens up. If you think that, oh, they've had a couple, they're fine. When you can turn that switch on anytime, right? Mm-hmm. Once we realize we don't need that substance or that situation to happen before we can be a certain way, it opens that door for, taking that away.
Yeah. And I think something you just touched on there is, for a lot of us, we tell ourselves stories, right? It's, well, I have to have a few drinks to loosen up, right? Or, I have to, eat certain foods in order to kind of fit in and whatever, right? And so we do those things because we fear that taking those things away will make us become a different person. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, it's just like, how do you kind of walk through that process and say, what things can I do to make sure that I stay that same person despite changing this habit? And you're able to do that.
Yeah, it took some trial and error on my part to figure out how I could be the same, comfortable the same way without it as I did with it. And honestly, we're talking about having a couple of drinks, but like this applies to anything that we want to change, right? If we're talking about, coffee break at work and you're always getting a few cookies because they're from the food truck or from the cafeteria, wherever you your environment, it's the way James Clear talks in Atomic Habits and, different, habit forming. It's like you take one thing away that you're used to doing in a situation, you have to replace it with something, or you have to, see what led you to want to do that the way that you're used to doing it.
Yeah. So now, are you still sober? Have you gone back to drinking?
No, I'm still not drinking. I'm more and more not on the break that I, started by in the book. It was always just a break. I wasn't sure what I was doing. And I've maintained, I haven't wanted to go back. I found I'm a lot healthier. I'm a lot more comfortable in the environments, not having it. And honestly, there's a lot more it's a lot more acceptable now than I think it's ever been. And there's more non-alcoholic mocktails and craft beers and stuff that are 0% that you can kind of look more the part without having the effects of alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to alcohol in particular, man, I think it's such a tough conversation for a lot of people, right? I mean, I've personally never got into drinking, so it never appealed to me. And as I got into like college, started, working after college, things like that, there was a lot of social pressure from people to drink. And it got to a point where I started finding it easier to tell people that I was a recovering alcoholic than to tell them that I just don't drink. They were actually more accepting of me saying that I'm a recovering alcoholic than me saying that I just make a conscious decision to not drink.
Yeah, definitely. So to pay respect for, for a minute, there's, everyone's dealing with their own things and substances and addictions, or, I'd give everybody benefit of the doubt and hope that, that they find the help they need. But
Yeah.
there was a time, I agree with you 100%. If it would have been easier for me to have it mandated that I not drink, or mandated that I not do a certain thing, or to be a recovering, alcoholic or something, like it would have been easier exactly for me to say that to someone.
Yeah.
Because then the pressure's gone. They're like, oh, okay. And then they're all quiet and awkward about it.
Yeah.
Whereas if for me to just say, I'm not going to do this anymore, it's like, well, why not? And, if you want to quit having donuts, people are more acceptable for you not eating donuts than they are not having drinks. Because, when we get to someone's house, or we get to a function, or, a party or wedding, like it's almost, part of what you have to do. It's just easier. Someone goes to your house, oh, you want to drink? Like, let's have a beer together.
Yeah.
And it's all fine. It's not to take that from people. And I don't need people to feel weird. Like even just the other day, there was, some friends that were like, oh, you're that guy now. Like, well, no, I don't need you to not drink, because I'm not. Like, do your thing.
Right. You're like, I don't care. You can drink all you want.
Okay. I don't feel like I have to have it anymore because someone else does. So, and that's with anything. I'm not going to have a piece of cake because someone feels it's, necessary. If I want one, well, I'll have one.
I think, that's when we talk about, connecting to things bigger than us, I think that's why it's so important, right? Because there's going to be a lot of times that you will be challenged where other people feel uncomfortable, and it makes you uncomfortable that you're making other people uncomfortable. And you have to be connected to something bigger than you, to a bigger purpose than just, I'm doing this just because, in order to stick with it.
Yeah, there was times, and like part of my rules, right? Like having fun and being involved. There was a few from work that were going to Niagara Falls. So we were doing a guys trip for work, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go. So there was 5 of us that went, and there was, these were work buddies. So, there was times, this weekend where as soon as we left, the one guy's like, oh, you're going to drink with us. I'm like, well, no, I'm going to come here and I'm going to drink these 0% things, which, I never did in the beginning. Like I wanted to lose that entire habit. So I stayed off of anything close to it for the first 9 or 10 months. But, at this trip, it was like, you're going to drink with us. Well, no, I'm not going to. The guy was like, oh, well, your wife's not here. Okay. That doesn't mean anything to what's going on. Like this is for me. This is for her and my kids as well. Like, absolutely. But this decision and this thing I'm working on, like, this is important to me, and this is my own accountability. So even though like I could have at any point, went back or snuck a beer or had something here and there, like that was not my intention. And like you said, that was the bigger purpose. Like this was a challenge I did for myself, and whether I could hide it or not wasn't gonna help keep me accountable for what I was trying to achieve.
Yeah. I think one thing you just touched on there that a lot of people kind of miss out on too is that it's not necessarily about the thing, right? It's about what else is going on. It's like you're doing this because, for whatever reason in the beginning, but by this point, you're doing it because it's making you a better person. I'm sure you felt like you're a better husband, you're a better father, and you enjoyed being that better person. And so, like,
Definitely.
when somebody says to you, "Oh, well, your wife's not here," it's like, well, okay, yeah, she's not here, but I'm not doing this, or I'm not making his decision because I fear some punishment from my wife for doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm doing it because me being this person makes me a better husband, makes me a better father, and that's who I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it didn't take away from the weekend at all, like, or anything else I've done since, like, the guys had their nights, and there was others that didn't feel they had to drink as much. I've felt an influence where, okay, I'm not doing it. Other people have not done it. And I don't need people to feel that way. But it's like anything, if there's one person in the room that's going to challenge, positively or negatively what's going on, there will be other people that will feel the same way, that will or won't, depending on what it is we're talking about, participate. So, I have felt the benefit. And like I said, that weekend, the guys didn't feel, I don't believe they felt like there was any less taken away, because, we still did the things. I wasn't the guy in the corner judging everybody. One of my kind of rules early on basically stemmed around not all of a sudden being everybody's designated driver. I took my share buying rounds. I paid my share of cabs and Ubers. It was, important that I didn't want to all of a sudden be like, I want to participate and I want to, give to the group, but I'm not going to do it by, being married to the evening by,
Yeah.
driving everybody around and living that life.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It's like when you start making changes in your life, whether it's alcohol or anything, you have to set your boundaries on people, right? And you have to decide, what do you want it to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, a lot of this would have been a lot easier if I wasn't so proud of what I believed was my set mentality. If I felt like I could have asked the questions and read the books and basically done everything I've done since that moment I've decided to change, it would have maybe made it a lot easier. Now, maybe I would have, not gotten so involved with it the way that I did. I don't regret the way that it worked out for me, but I can definitely share that, because while we all have to take the pieces from, all of this content that we relate to, that person that maybe needs that push to say, I'm just going to ask for help, I'm just going to reach out to Sean and say, hey, what did you do? I'm having a hard time. I want to give that feedback. That's why I'm here. For someone like me that, felt too proud to ask, was from similar environments where, you're caught in this bubble that you're not supposed to ask. You're just supposed to fix it. We're out here and absolutely ask. Absolutely don't feel like you have to sit there and figure it out, when there's lots of content out there that speaks to the easier way of doing it.
Yeah. So one thing we didn't really talk about, excuse me, that you just kind of brought up is that it was a challenge at times, right? That there was some difficulties with it. So when you were starting, what do you feel were the biggest obstacles that you ran into?
My biggest obstacles, and a lot of, so the title of my book, Going Dry, My Path to Overcoming Habitual Drinking, the habitual part was the most important part in how I like, and then the biggest challenge was, it wasn't, it wasn't, sorry, it was, I felt I had to have a drink, or I had to be doing a certain thing because of, what I was doing. I was at a wedding. It was Friday. I'm barbecuing, camping. Like, there's certain things that I always did, not always, but a lot of the time did, while or with a drink in my hand.
Right.
If a friend would come over, it's like, oh, it's Friday. Let's have a beer. It was like the habit portion, the routine portion. So the toughest part for me was doing that without, it was learning that I didn't need to have that drink in my hand anymore to do something a certain way. And some of it felt like I had to learn how to walk again. It was like I had to teach myself how to go to a concert that, we're staying overnight with some friends, go to a concert and not drink and not whatever. So it's like, the biggest challenge was just relearning how to do things that I was so used to doing a certain
Yeah.
way before.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people find that anytime they start trying to make changes in their life, that there are so many things that we just do on autopilot and we don't even think about them. And that's really what you're describing here is there's this unawareness, and then all of a sudden, like you start to find yourself in situations, and you're like, oh wait, I would normally have a drink right now, right?
Yeah, and it's like I didn't have to have that anymore once I was aware of, how often I would grab one, or, like I'm on the fire department. So like it wasn't that bad for me because I was wanting to be ready to go. I've done
Yeah,
this long because I've wanted to do it. So, it wasn't that I'd, just come home from work and have, as many. There was definitely some nights and I wouldn't respond to calls if they came in. That was part of being on the volunteer department. But like, to have one or two or five, like, it'd get to a certain point where that was a routine and that was what I was used to. We're going barbecuing, having a couple of beers, why not? To then learn how to have something else. It didn't to have one or two. I'm probably I might now because I haven't had any in a long time, but you're not going to feel that, right? You're gonna have that. It's social. It's fine. You move on. Where in the beginning I was doing it to try and live a bit healthier, try and lose some weight or find some motivation. And, I'd learn a lot later, as I kind of suggested earlier, there was a lot more compounding on the habits and routines I started to work on that had led me to something much bigger. And
yeah,
if I thought in the beginning I was going to lose 100 pounds and be sober for 2 years, I would have laughed at myself. I wouldn't have done it. So
yeah.
by breaking it down into such small pieces and then doing different things and documenting it and consistency, it's led me to where I'm at now. And, I'm not special. Everybody can do it this way. Just like me, I didn't have the tools to, I didn't know how to go about starting it or maintaining it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, that's always kind of the question of like, well, where do I even start at, right? I mean, maybe they don't want to give up drinking. Maybe they just want to cut back on it a little bit. Or maybe it's not even about alcohol. Maybe it's about food for them. Or maybe they just want to get better sleep or stress less or whatever, right? And the question is always like, where do I start? What's the first thing? And I think so many people get caught up in this trap of, if I'm going to do something, I might as well go ahead and go all in, do everything. And that means that I now need to go out and find the absolute best solution and I need to go and implement it. And the reality is that approach fails 99% of the time.
Yeah, it does, because as soon as it's difficult, or if it's difficult, you might last for a week, but then and you give up because it was hard. I was doing a hit exercise. It was like a 10,000 step hit exercise. I felt tired and amazing afterwards, but after a couple days in a row, it was like I just not that I couldn't do it, but I wasn't going to because it was so difficult. Whereas if I would have started smaller and done something, even 10 minutes, it would have probably led me to a point where I felt good with doing this 10,000 step hit exercise on a consistent basis. But because I started so big, so early, and it became difficult for me, it was easy to let it go.
I love always sharing this example of, and I've used this with clients and everything over the years, is, say you're someone that you need to exercise, but you hate exercise, right? So you don't go hire a personal trainer and you don't get a perfect detailed plan and you don't start doing 45-minute workouts. You put on your workout clothes. And then after a week of putting on your workout clothes, maybe you actually get in the car and drive to the gym, right?
Yeah.
And then you sit in the parking lot. And then after a couple of days of sitting in the parking lot, you start to go, well, this is ridiculous. And so you go in. And maybe the first day you just walk around and look at the equipment and then you leave, right? And then you keep doing that. And eventually you go, well, this is silly. I might as well do something while I'm here, right? And so you do a couple of exercises and then you leave. And then at some point you go, you know what? I might as well just do a real workout while I'm here. And then you start building consistently. You start doing little workouts. And next thing you know, you're one of those crazy people that works out 5 days a week.
Exactly. And that whole system in anything, right? Like if it's, eating better or brushing your teeth, like everything in that exact same scenario, just put your shoes on. Like right now, I've winter blues, whatever it is, I've, had a bit of a hard time getting that workout in. So right now I'm just going to my garage, but I've got a 10-pound medicine ball. I'm just picking it up, I'm just going, make a point to go to the garage and just hold it for a minute. Then I started doing some stretches with it. And then now I'm throwing it down, and now like it is the exact example you just used. And I've done that, 4, 5, 6 different ways for the few things I've been able to work on this past couple of years.
Yeah, I love the example of just like mentally keeping yourself checked in, right? It's like, go pick up the medicine ball, just hold it. Then you have to do anything with it. Just, there's something about the routine of walking out there, picking up that ball that keeps your mind viewing you as an active person.
Yeah.
Right? As soon as you stop going out there to pick up the ball, you now start to develop a different identity.
Yep. And to add to that, the one thing I just heard, and is an interview James Clear did, once again, author of Atomic Habits, he was talking about how he doesn't like to set goals anymore. He doesn't like to set goals. He likes to ask himself better questions. So I found myself starting asking myself better questions. And his example is, instead of saying I'm going to lose 100 pounds or I'm going to get more healthy, whatever, start to ask yourself, what would a healthy person eat a sleeve of Oreos? Or would a healthy person not go and pick up the medicine ball and throw it around? I found it's a lot less pressure if I'm just, thinking, am I going to eat this, piece of cake? Or, would a healthy person eat another piece of something? Or would someone that goes to the gym or would someone that does this not do that? It's an easy question that kind of gets your mind back around, making that decision that is or isn't productive for you, whatever you're working on.
Yeah, one of the phrases that I personally use, it's kind of along those same lines, is I'm choosing to. And because I think so many times, like, we put negativity around stuff, right? We focus on things being negative, so we'll go, oh, I can't eat carbs, right? Or I can't do this, I can't do that. And what I always like to do is say, I'm choosing to. So if I'm having an indulgence, if I'm eating, something that's 1,500 calories of nothing but plain sugar, I'm like,
yeah,
I'm choosing to enjoy this treat today, right? Not because I've earned it, not because I've been good, not because I ate salad, not just because it's there. And you know what? Life's short, and I want to eat this. I'm not going to eat it every day, right? Because then that goes back to your question: would a healthy person eat this cake every single day?
Every day, yeah.
But every now and then, sure. And by telling myself I'm choosing to do this, I'm giving myself permission.
Yeah.
And it takes all that negative connotations out of it, right? But at the same time, it works the opposite way when I'm wanting to be lazy, right? And I'm saying I'm choosing to skip my workout today. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm doing what? No, that's not what I want. No, I don't want to do that.
And you know what? You need those moments, right? You need to choose to do that, positive and call it negative, or productive and non-productive. You need those two times, because otherwise you'll never get back on it if you fall off, right? Like if I'm going to avoid sugar for so long or not have cake every day, all of a sudden I have a piece of cake. It's like, well, now the whole thing's ruined. I'm not making progress because I had a carb today. Like that is not going to help. That you're just as likely to, go back to whatever lifestyle you had before because you had that one thing. Whereas you need to choose to have that, non-productive day or that indulgence just to keep yourself, at check, or just to allow yourself to, but like I found it, I was, having that one piece and then all of a sudden it's two and more. And, that was the lifestyle I had, plus 100 pounds from right now. And, I didn't have it in my mind that I could just have that moment and then get back on it, get refocused again. So it was important to, get back on after letting myself, get off of it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because one thing I've noticed, I see it in your story, I see it in my story when people always ask me, like, how did you lose 80 pounds? I'm like, one day at a time, because I really had no set number in mind. I just started making healthier decisions. I started changing stuff. I tell people I eat fast food for the first 40 pounds. I was still eating fast food like 5 days a week because I was working in retail at the time, and that was all that was available to me. I just made better fast food choices, right?
Yeah.
And, the thing is, it made it sustainable. And I never got to a point where I completely took something away from myself. So I never had to feel like, oh, I can't go back to this, right? And I think sometimes it can be good to cut certain stuff out if you know it's a trigger for you, obviously, right? But like in your instance, let's say that you got through this first 2 months and then you said, you know what? I just wanted to see if I could do it. I'm going to go back to drinking, but I'm going to drink less. How long do you realistically think you would have drank less for, right? At some point, all those old habits probably would kick back in if you didn't have a real plan in place. And that's where I think a lot of guys struggle at is they try to like knuckle through something for a short period of time. And then there's no plan in place to like make it sustainable for life.
Yeah. I did find that mentally thinking about it, because I got to that 60 days, 2 months away from it. And I was like, well, I'm not ready yet. And I learned about 100 days. I forget which podcast it was. It was probably, a School of Greatness. I wish I remembered who was on as a guest, but they had said 100 days, and I looked a little more into it, and I'd already got 60. So I was pushing to get to 100. And at 60 days, I'm thinking about this 100, thinking like, it's not enough yet. I don't feel like it's enough. I could have easily, just like anything I've been able to give up or add or change, to go back after a short time. It would have been easy for me. Like, we're just programmed that way. We'll find the way to do it easier. And if it's our routine and our habit and it's a trait that we're used to doing, absolutely, we're going to find our way back that way sooner. And yeah, if I didn't not have, if I had the 0% and the things that tasted like it, or if I had, went back to it sooner, not to say it would have gotten worse, but it wouldn't have gotten better. I wouldn't have, learned as much as I've learned since then and applied it positively in my life.
Yeah. And it's like now, if you were to decide that you wanted to drink again, you'd have a much better structure around it. You'd have a better plan in place. But after being away from it so long and realizing that you didn't need it, the desire to even go back to it is just not there.
And that's where I'm at. Like, I've got the tools and the confidence to, be in that environment and not have it where I felt like I just had to before. Like, everybody was doing it, and it was just, the common theme in the room. And, talk about construction. Everybody comes back from the weekend, and then Mondays in the work trailer were always about, what'd you do this weekend? And, how bad did you feel yesterday? Like, it was, to get through and not need it anymore. Like, yeah, I don't have to have that mechanism. I'm still going to be involved in the function. I'm not going to, leave early because I'm not drinking. Like, I still want to have a good time. I just don't need that anymore to do it.
Yeah. What that hits on it, and just to kind of bring this back is a point for the guys listening to us right now, is you didn't sit down and necessarily make a conscious decision to do this, but what you did was you started to create an identity before that identity existed.
Yep. That was what I alluded to earlier about, realizing later where my this is just who I am mentality, where I thought I had to just keep existing and keep the same habits and routines because this is just where I'm at. I'm going to be this person because that's just what I'm used to. Once I got to a point later, I was like, you know what? Like, I don't need to do that anymore. It was absolutely that moment where I, didn't need to continue on the same path. I could change what it was I thought made me who I was, to be someone that could listen to podcasts and could read books and could listen to audiobooks and, could appreciate listening to a Brene Brown or a Mel Robbins book that would have never been okay to talk about in the work trailer or at the fire department. Like, manners, we're not doing that, and I don't care, because like it's given me a lot of tools to be able to make myself better and to make me better for my family, listening to and appreciating different perspectives and different resources.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I see this a lot where people who have made positive changes in their life are always happy to share their story, share their experiences, but very rarely do you see people who have gone through that kind of transformation trying to force other people to make that transformation, right? Versus people who are doing a lot of things that might be more negative or might not be helping them. They're very persistent about getting everybody to come along and do it with them, right?
Yeah. There was, I've never been, the extroverted out there kind of type. It was especially because I was, not wanting to work on things, but not asking questions and being, in my own mind about it.
Mm-hmm.
For me to share it now, it's like I'm doing it not because it's my comfort zone, but because I needed that. And I'm hopeful that anybody that I can reach with, my story, because like I said when we started, I don't feel like it's a unique story. I feel like this is very common and something a lot of people deal with. Well, I'm okay talking about it. I'm actually wanting to get it out there even more, just so that someone like where I was at, sitting in the lunch trailer or at the fire hall, completely fine with my own masculinity and, completely, comfortable in the group, but just feeling like there was something I needed to be able to work on or talk about or whatever, just to say, like, there's people out there that are doing it and you can do it too. If you wanted to just accept that you're not stuck where you are.
Yeah, I mean, that's, for me, man, that was a big part of my passion for, the recent change that we made to the podcast to focusing on men specifically, because I just feel like there's so many guys out there that are living the life that other people want them to live.
Mm-hmm.
They're giving into the pressure of their buddies. They're doing whatever their significant others telling them to do. Their whole identity is wrapped up in then just like, I'm a dad, and so I just have to do whatever, the kids have going on. And the truth is, when we take a step back and we start taking better care of ourselves and we start developing that deeper health, we can be in great shape. We can be great employees and leaders at work. We can be great husbands. We can be great fathers. We don't have to choose. We don't have to just be one thing. And we don't necessarily have to live in other people's expectations of us. We can set our own expectations, and then we can be a light to other people. Because like you mentioned earlier about, your weekend trip, because you made this decision, you never had to go and start preaching to people. You never had to go start telling people about how much better life is and how they should all give up alcohol. People saw it. People saw the changes in you, and they said, I want what he has.
And it was absolutely, there was times afterwards where I had people that I worked with reach out and from all my circles and just ask questions or, start to talk about different podcasts or books and appreciate different things. And like, it was almost like in some of my circles, it was inviting other people that were wanting the same or doing the same to start talking about it, because where I was saying I didn't have that, didn't know someone that I could reach out to ask about, oh, what's a good podcast that will give me some tools, teach me about Unshakable Habits. Where are these things? I became that for some people, and it was empowering. It was great because I didn't want to thrust it on people. I don't, because I wouldn't have been receptive to that.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't have listened to the information I didn't want because I was, stubborn and in my own mind about it. Like, if I didn't want that and it was being thrust upon me, I wouldn't have been very receptive to it. So I'm not about to do that to somebody that doesn't want it. But if somebody asks me questions, like, I want to help that person. I want to say, listen, this is a great podcast, and this book is incredible. Like, you should check it out.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that I was wanting to do, but needed the right time to do it. When somebody's looking for it, that's when they're going to be the most receptive to it.
Yeah, that's the key, right? And that's why I always, like, with my coaching, I have what's called client-centered coaching, where I believe in allowing people to decide what they want to work on, right? Even if it's not going to be the best thing, even if it's not going to be like the thing that's going to create the most change for them or anything else, where do you want to start? Where are you most receptive to change right now? Because people do not like to be told what to do. Even when we ask to be told what to do, we don't like being told what to do.
Yeah, no, yeah. If there's something that we want to do, especially if you're getting started, back to where do I get started? If it's, you want to, start walking more, it's not about getting that person on something else, where they want to start is where they're going to feel the most impact, because they'll find their own momentum. They'll be consistent with it. They'll be accountable for it. If I didn't want to not drink, or I didn't want to brush my teeth, I wouldn't have done it the same way, right? I would have been very passive with it and given up long before it became productive.
Yeah. I think if we just kind of put a bow on this for people, the big takeaways here, right, are, number one, start small. Don't try to, like, imagine some big, huge thing, right? I always like to give an exercise to people. I call it the Back to the Future exercise. Imagine that Doc Brown comes and picks you up in the DeLorean. So, hopefully everyone listening to this podcast is old enough to get that reference. But, imagine, he picks you up, takes you into the future, and you see what your life is going to look like 10 years from now, right? What's going on in your life? Where are you? How do you act? What kind of people are around you? What are the things that you do? Like, what does your life look like day in and day out? And then don't try to be that overnight, but start saying, what kind of behaviors would that person take? Going back to those questions that you asked earlier, like, what does a healthy person do, right? And it's like, what would that future me do to get to that point? And you can start doing some of that stuff today, even if it's not perfect, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, don't try to make this about some big long-term dream that you're taking on. Just literally take it one day at a time, right? It doesn't matter how big the steps are, as long as you're always moving forward. And then, the last thing I would kind of give people to take away from, this conversation today is, you don't have to be stuck, right? You can get past all the expectations of other people. You can get past being brought up a certain way, all the thinking, whatever person you are that you feel like you're stuck being, you don't have to be that person. You can change if you want to. And I really think that that's really what your story illustrates more than anything else, is that even though you felt like, this is my identity, this is who I am, this is such a huge part of me, you were still able to change that.
Yeah, that's 100%. Once it became clear to me that where I came from, or what my influences are, who and what my circles are, my environments, once I realized that while that's all helped me be who I am, it doesn't have to define everything. I can go about changing that and being a different person. And it's not a special story. Everybody has the same, capability to do that. You don't have to be what people are setting out for you to be. You don't have to live that life.
Yeah. You don't have to play by other people's expectations, and you don't have to continue to be a person that you've always been.
That's right.
But if you like the person you are, then, by all means, stay that person. But
yeah,
if you're not happy, then change something. Do something about it. So, Sean, real quick, if you could, I know you mentioned it earlier, but if you could, again, just let people know about your book and also where they can connect with you at.
Okay, yeah, my My book is called Going Dry, My Path to Overcoming Habitual Drinking. Very much the first stage in my journey, and I think an important stage for anybody's journey. It's about my relationship with drinking, but it's definitely something that's relatable for anything that you might be going through. I've definitely applied it in a lot of other areas. Right now, I've got all my socials, my website, seanrobinson.ca. I've got links to all my podcasts and stuff I've been on. I'm putting as much content there as I can. I've got, I'm on Facebook, Going Dry, and Instagram, also going.dry, and Sean Robinson on LinkedIn.
Okay. And we will have links to all that, including links to where to purchase the book at in the show notes on the website also. So make sure that you check those out. So, Sean, I want to thank you very much for coming on today and sharing your story and some of your insights about what your journey looked like. Really think you gave a lot of valuable insights to people today, and I hope that people are walking away with a clear plan on how they want to move forward and taking that very first small step.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephen. I appreciate being here, and I've taken a lot of value from all of your insights as well.
I appreciate it, man. And just want to remind everyone that we are not all born unshakable, but we can all become unshakable.
Thank you for listening to the Unshakable Habits podcast with Coach Stephen Box. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and help us spread the word by sharing the podcast with other men. If you're ready to create unshakable habits, you can learn more and connect with us at unshakablehabits.com.